The shortest war in recorded human history lasted less time than it takes to boil an egg, watch a sitcom, or sit through the ads before a movie. From the first shot to the surrender, it ran for about 38 minutes. And in that half hour, around 500 people died. This is Graveyard Footnotes, history's strangest true stories, dug up. And today's grave got filled in just over half an hour. This is the Anglo-Zanzibar War, the most one-sided, lopsided, over-before-lunch conflict ever fought. And it started, like most disasters, with a dead guy and an inheritance. Zanzibar is an island just off the coast of East Africa. In the 1890s, it was a wealthy sultanate, grown fat on spices, ivory, and for a long and ugly time, the slave trade. Whoever controlled Zanzibar controlled a serious chunk of the Indian Ocean's money. And by this point, the people quietly running the show were the British. Zanzibar was a British protectorate, which is a polite diplomatic way of saying it was independent, as long as it did exactly what Britain told it to do. And one of those rules was very specific. When a Sultan of Zanzibar died, the next one needed British approval before taking the throne. The current Sultan, Hamad bin Thuwaini, understood the deal perfectly. He was cooperative, friendly to Britain, and not a problem. Until the 25th of August, 1896, when he suddenly, conveniently, dropped dead. Many people, then and now, suspected he was poisoned. And the prime suspect was his cousin, Khalid bin Bargash, because within literally hours of Hamad's death, Khalid had moved into the palace, surrounded himself with guards, and declared himself the new Sultan. No British approval, no waiting, just vibes. Now, from Khalid's point of view, this was simply taking what was his. From Britain's point of view, this was a man skipping the one and only rule, the British approval rule, that the entire protectorate was built on. And Britain did not respond to that kind of thing gently. The British already had their own preferred candidate, a man named Hamad bin Mohammed, who could be relied on to be appropriately obedient. So the British consul sent Khalid a message: "Step down. Leave the palace. This is not your throne." Khalid's answer was, essentially, "Come and make me." And to be fair, Khalid did not come empty-handed. He barricaded himself inside the palace with a force of around 2,800 men, made up of palace guards, servants, civilians, and the Sultanate's small army. He was ready, he thought, to defend his crown. His arsenal sounded impressive on paper: several artillery pieces, a handful of machine guns including a Gatling gun, and the pride of the Zanzibari Navy, a single-armed royal yacht called the Glasgow sitting out in the harbour. A real fortress. Against almost anyone else, this might have been a fight. Unfortunately for Khalid, he was not facing almost anyone else. He was facing the Royal Navy, at the absolute peak of its power. And it just so happened that a cluster of British warships was already sitting right there in Zanzibar's harbour, guns idling, a short distance from the palace windows. 3 cruisers, 2 gunboats, and a few hundred extra sailors and marines. Their guns could turn a wooden palace into firewood in minutes. The British did the math instantly. This was not going to be a war. It was going to be a demonstration. So they issued an ultimatum, crisp and clear. Khalid had until 9 o'clock the next morning, the 27th of August, to lower his flag, leave the palace, and surrender. If he did not, they would open fire. The clock was, very literally, ticking. Khalid, perhaps believing Britain was bluffing, perhaps believing his men could hold, sent back a defiant reply. He would not lower his flag, and he did not believe they would actually fire. Through the night, messages went back and forth. Every attempt at a peaceful exit failed. By dawn, both sides were simply waiting for 9 o'clock. At 9 o'clock exactly, the British gun crews stood ready. The harbour was silent. The palace had not surrendered. The flag was still flying. There was a short, tense pause as everyone waited to see if Khalid would blink. He did not. At 2 minutes past 9, the order was given, and the warships opened fire on the palace at point-blank range. The first shells smashed straight through the walls. The Sultan's beautiful wooden palace, packed with people, was hit by the full weight of the Royal Navy's guns all at once. It was a massacre, not a battle. The wooden structure was torn apart and set ablaze almost immediately. Khalid's artillery, his pride and joy, was knocked out in the opening moments. The antique cannons blasted off their mounts before they could do anything meaningful. Out in the harbour, the royal yacht Glasgow, Khalid's entire navy actually had the nerve to fire on the British fleet. It was a brave gesture. It was answered immediately. The British returned fire and sank the little yacht where it sat in a matter of minutes. Its crew was later fished out of the water. Inside, it was chaos. The palace was collapsing and burning. Khalid's defenders were being cut down or scattered, and Khalid himself, the man who had been so defiant the night before, did the sensible thing. He slipped out a back exit and ran, abandoning the palace, the throne, and his men. The fighting ended for the most ceremonial reason imaginable. By tradition, the war was over when the Sultan's flag came down. It had been left flying as the palace burned around it. Eventually, a British shell, or the collapse of the building, brought the flagpole down, and with the flag, the war fell too. The ceasefire was called at around 9:40 in the morning, which means, depending on exactly how you count it, the entire war lasted somewhere between 38 and 40 minutes. The shortest war in recorded history, over before the morning tea had even gone cold. But the casualty list was not short at all. On Khalid's side, around 500 people were killed or wounded in those 38 minutes, crammed inside a wooden building hit by naval artillery. On the British side, the grand total of casualties was one single sailor who was wounded and later recovered just fine. Khalid, our runaway sultan, made it to the German consulate, where the Germans, rivals of the British, gave him shelter. The British demanded he be handed over. The Germans refused and eventually smuggled him out to German East Africa, lifting him over the wall and straight into a boat so his feet never technically touched British-controlled ground. He stayed free for nearly 20 years, until the First World War, when the British finally caught up with him and took him into custody. He had outrun his own war by 2 whole decades. Not bad for a man whose reign as Sultan lasted roughly 2 days. Back in Zanzibar, the British installed their man, Hamoud, as the new Sultan within hours. He was exactly as cooperative as advertised. The whole point of the war, getting the obedient candidate onto the throne, had been achieved before lunchtime. And then came the most British detail of the entire affair. After flattening the palace and crushing the uprising, the authorities sent the new government a bill. They demanded that Zanzibar pay for the cost of the shells the Royal Navy had fired at it. You attacked us, so now please pay for the ammunition we used to win. Invoice attached. There was one genuinely good thing buried in all of this. In the wake of the war, with a fully compliant Sultan now on the throne, slavery was finally abolished in Zanzibar the following year, ending one of the most notorious slave markets in the world. A grim corner of history, closed almost as an afterthought. 38 minutes, 500 dead, 1 bruised sailor, a sultan who ruled for 2 days and then ran for 20 years, and a bill for the bullets. History tends to remember the longest wars. We just dug up the shortest one as a footnote. This has been Graveyard Footnotes. Subscribe, and we will see you at the next grave.